muli bwanja Malawi apatuta bweranso ndi nkhani ina yovuta kwambiri kodi mwamva ero wina ogwira ntchito mu ofesi ya malemu Dr. Saulos Chilima mu nthawi imeneyo ya ulamuliro wa chipani cha Malawi Congress Party waulula kodi mwamva wavumbulutsa zisisi ndipo wanena zoona zimene akuzidziwa pa nkhani imeneyi. Kodi inu mukamva nkhani imeneyi mutha kukhulupirira kuti zinachitikadi zonsezi zinali kuti? Kodi inquiry yoyamba ija bwanji iyeyi sanamfunse ndifayani sanabwere kuti akakambe naye komanso kuti akaperekere umboni pa nkhani zimenezi? Komatu apa amuthalikatu atapanga inquiry ina yatsopano zikuoneka kuti zinthu zayamba kusongola. Pali mafunso a Malawi ambiri amene iyeyo akhoza kuyankha chifukwa kuti waulula zinthu zimene inu simunathe kuyembekezera. Tatiyeni tione kuti kodi nkhaniyi ndizoona zinachitikadi. Apatu pempho lija lamene Chilima mkazi wa malemu Saulos Chilima amene itu ndithu hayi luoneka ngati tsopano likupita kumapeto kuti nkhani ija iboleze. Eru mbuli wakhala pang'ono kuti ayi ndithu mbewa zikangomva tswa basitu ziluke kumbuli kuja wabola ndithu kumeneko. Hayi nkhani yopsa kwambiri yodabwitsa. Achakwera izi koma nkadziwa? Tati ntimvere limodzi Malawi tione kodi zidayambika bwanji mkufotokoza konseku. Kodi ndikuona nanga izi ngati zinachitikadi choncho, kodi chipani cha MCP chikulipo bwanji pa nkhanizi? Tapangani like, tapangani subscribe masanano.
As former secretary to the vice president to testify on the chronology of the events from the time the late Vice President returned from South Africa until the travel by the late Vice President on 10th June 2024 to Nkatabe. Approvals obtained and the institutional arrangements preceding the journey to attend the funeral of late Kasambara, and the role I played and that of the office of the Vice President concerning the planning of the late Vice President's program on 10th June 2024, travel arrangements, passenger coordination, communications with government institutions and events immediately preceding the departure of the plane of the late Vice President from Kamuzu International Airport. In this regard, it is in this regard that I prepare a written submission covering the requested information for submission on the date of my appearance, which is today, 18th June 2024. Honorable Chairperson and honorable members of the committee, I therefore duly submit the information requested as follows. Chronology of the events from the time the Vice President returned from South Africa until the travel by the late Vice President on 10th June to Nkatabe. The Vice President had traveled to the Republic of South Korea to attend the Korea-Africa Summit from 4th to 5th June 2024, delegated by President Chakwera, and departed South Korea on 6th June 2024. The late Vice President had a 3-day layover in South Africa from 7th to 9th June 2024 after the summit in South Korea. I accompanied the late Vice President to South Korea, and I was with him during the 3-day layover in South Africa and on the return journey to Malawi on 9th June 2024. The Vice President was expected to return to Malawi on Saturday 8th June 2024 through Chilima International Airport. In the afternoon of 9th June 2024, the late Vice President was to see President Chakwera leave Malawi for Bahamas through Chilima International Airport. On 8th June 2024, the Vice President asked me to confirm President Chakwera's program to the Bahamas so that we can plan for the funeral of late Kasambala, if all possible. Having gone through the President's program, he commented that the funeral program could not work then, but he would confirm with me later. Owing to the changes on the date and port of exit of President Chakwera's departure to the Bahamas from 9th June 2024 to 10th June 2024, and from Chileka to Kamuzu International Airport in the afternoon of 10th June 2024, the late Vice President directed me to make changes that would enable the late Vice President to arrive in Lilongwe on 9th June 2024, in time for the President Chakwera's departure to the Bahamas on 10th June 2024. As was always the case on travel arrangements, I was responsible for the change process made through appropriate officers and offices. Ideally, the Principal Secretary for Administration in the Office of the Vice President would be the first call. And outside the office, other primary collaborating ministry departments and agencies. Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Committee members, as you note, the primary institutions in this case include Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Principal Secretary for Administration had also traveled to South Africa as the lead of an advanced team to arrange the protocols and logistics before the arrival of the late Vice President on 7th June 2024. In this regard, the most senior officer in Malawi was the Deputy Director of Administration, Mr. Alfred Nkoma. Events from the time the late Vice President returned from South Africa. While in South Africa, the late Vice President had informed me of his wish to attend the funeral ceremony of late Kasambala, and that was on the morning of 9th, and return in time to see off President Chakwera to the Bahamas. And that should he not be able to travel to Nkata Bay, his spouse would represent him, accompanied by some of his advisors, who he would identify later. In this regard, he directed me to work on the logistics, including checking the availability of the military aircraft. I called the Undersecretary, who was in Lilongwe, the Deputy Director of Administration, Honorable Chairperson and members, to start preparations and check with the Malawi Defense Force on the availability of the aircraft. I later learned that the late Vice President had informed the Principal Secretary of Administration of the intended program to Nkata Bay. Honorable Chairperson, can I change the gadgets that I'm using so that I can?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. I'll proceed, your permission, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Committee members.
You proceed, yes.
Thank you, sir. I'll start from the point I stopped. I called the Deputy Director of Administration, who was in Lilongwe, to start preparations and check with the Malawi Defense Force on the availability of the aircraft. That's when I later learned that the late Vice President had informed the Principal Secretary of Administration of the intended program to Nkata Bay. On arrival at Leka Airport, the late Vice President and the core support team, including myself, disembarked for the 30-minute transiting time to Kamuzu International Airport. While in the VVIP lounge, I got a message phone from the Deputy Director of Administration informing me that there was no available equipment for use by the Vice President. I immediately informed the late Vice President, who guided me to check with the Army Commander if the one that is used by the President, that is the VVIP equipment, was in service. To this end, I called the Army Commander, and he informed me that the VVIP craft was the one that was chartered to carry the remains of late Kasambara. In our discussion, he would check with Air Force Command on the possibility of the craft making the round trip in the morning of 10th June 2024 before carrying late Kasambara's family back to Blantyre. I duly informed the late Vice President on what the Army Command advised. I did not get the feedback before takeoff to Kamuzu International Airport. After arrival in Lilongwe, the Army Commander called me that it was possible to use the craft, but I should engage family members on the arrangement of the Vice President using the craft in the morning of 10th June 2024 to and from Mzuzu from Kamuzu International Airport, since it was already chartered. Given this guidance, I called Mr. Joshua Valera, the late Vice President's Special Advisor, if he knew any relatives of Mr. Kasambala that I would talk to on the possibility of using the MDF craft for the Vice President's trip to Mzuzu in Katabe. Mr. Valero informed me that he was with two relatives, Counsel Mwale and Brigadier General Wali, and these duly confirmed that it was possible for the Vice President to use the craft. To this end, I called the Army Commander, who continued with the Malawi Defense Force internal communications. This was the last engagement with the Malawi Defense Force. Post securing the craft activities, having secured the possible use of the craft, I called the late Vice President on the availability of the craft, and he directed me to proceed with logistics. In this regard, I informed the Deputy Director of Administration to do the needful, which I believe he did, or the responsible Malawi Air Force officers called him for details, including a quotation of the trip from the Malawi Defense Force. As I'll be reporting later, this quotation was submitted in the morning of Monday, and I have it in possession. I called the Deputy Chief of Protocol that the late President would travel to Mzuzu on the military craft. I did because it is practice when the Vice President is traveling by air. The Directorate of Protocol in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs works on the manifest of those boarding the craft with the Vice President. The late Vice President guided me, as was the practice, on who was to accompany him to late Kasambala's funeral ceremony as follows. Inclusive of himself, Madam Mary Chilima, the spouse, Dr. Lake Sikwese, Secretary to the Vice President, Madam Chanel Muluzi, Advisor to the Vice President, Assistant Commissioner Kapeni, Guard Commander, Inspector Chi Maneni, the aide-de-camp, Gloria Kantukule, Personal Protection Officer to Madam Chilima, Abdul Lapken, Deputy Chief of Protocol, a medical officer who was to be identified later by the head of the medical team. In this case, eventually it was Mr. Daniel Kanyemba. Mrs. Emily Chintu Piri, advisor, and then Miss Winnie Nyondo, advisor. This list was reduced later to 8 passengers, following communication from the Malawi Air Force that the plane could only carry 8 passengers, as it had been configured to carry the remains of late Kasambala. I duly informed the late Vice President, and he directed that Mrs. Emily Chintu Piri, the advisor, and Mrs. Winnie Nyondo, advisor, be removed. I was also removed as I had to finalize some memos and documents that the late Vice President had asked me to prepare for submission to the President before departure to the Bahamas. I also informed the Guard Commander on the travel arrangements to enable him work on the security details. Communication with the Secretary to the President and the clerk to the Cabinet. Around 7:30 hours, I noticed that I had missed a voice call WhatsApp from the Secretary to the President and Cabinet, Ms. Corinne Zamba. At 17:33 hours, I called back with no answer. At 17:42, I sent SPC a message as follows: "Good evening, SPC, I missed your call." At 17:43, she called inquiring if the Vice President was back from South Korea and if I could confirm that he would be traveling to Nkatabe for the funeral ceremony of late Kasambala. At this point, I informed that the Vice President had indicated that he would attend, but I was yet to be given the final position as logistics were being finalized. And let me also emphasize that at this point, the confirmation of the use of the craft had not been made. I have honorable chairperson and honorable committee members, an itemized submission, granular one, minute, hour by hour, minute by minute, that has been submitted electronically. At 20:05, I missed another call from Ms. Colleen Zamba, and I immediately called back. During this call, she wanted to find out if there was space in the craft so that Honorable Chimwendo Banda would join the late Vice President. At this point, the assumption was that she's already been informed through other means that the Vice President was going to go to Nkatabe using the craft. I informed Ms. Zamba that the MDF had advised that the plane had only space for 8 passengers and 3 crew members, as this time had been told by the Deputy Chief of Protocol that the plane had been configured to carry only 8 passengers. I further informed Ms. Colleen Zamba that even some people who were to form part of the delegation were removed from the list, and they would go by road. Later in the evening, I received a call from the clerk of cabinet, then Mr. Samson Ngutwa, who informed me of a 5 million kwacha condolence money that was being arranged to be given to the late Vice President to condole the Kasambala family on behalf of the government. He told me that he had been instructed by the Secretary to the President and Cabinet to contact me and make arrangements to hand over the money. He had already been in touch with the Deputy Director of Administration earlier on. I subsequently advised that this money be handed over to an appropriate officer or officers, that is accounts officers, in the morning of 10th June 2024. Specifically, I guided him to have the accounts officer and OPC to reach out to the chief accountant in the office of the Vice President. Internal normal arrangements will be further made to hand over the money to the ADC or the guard commander at the Vice President's residence before departure of the late Vice President to Kamuzu International Airport. Events immediately preceding the departure of the plane of the late Vice President from Kamuzu International Airport, 10th June 2024. In the morning of 10th June 2024, I read that an accounts officer from the office of the President Cabinet had handed over the money to Ms. Gangile, a personal secretary to the late Vice President. I led this arrangement when Ms. Gangile requested me to carry the money to Kamuzu International Airport and give it to the ADC or the guard commander, as there was no time to get to the Vice President's residence before departure to the airport, as the convoy had already positioned or mobilized. I duly carried the envelope containing the money as I was about to leave to see off the late Vice President at Kamuzu International Airport. And I handed over the money to the ADC who arrived together with the Vice President, but had disembarked from his car earlier than the VP would do. Upon arrival at the apron of Kamuzu International Airport, I was informed by the advanced protocol and security team that Madam Chilima was not going to accompany the Vice President. Around 09 or 09:05 hours, thereabout, the late Vice President arrived in company of the guard commander and the ADC, and I bid farewell by a handshake as he boarded the plane. During my farewell, he reminded me of the memos which had already indicated to him that they will be ready by the time he comes back from Nkatabe. Approval was obtained. Given the iteration in securing the craft on the evening of 9th June 2024, the formal paper processes would be completed the following day. In this regard, a letter, quotation from the MDF and the invoice on the same were made on 10th June 2024, a copy which I have here. There was no memo sent to the President by the late Vice President informing him of the travel to Nkatabe. The advisory was, as per the WhatsApp message between himself and myself, or discussion between me and the late Vice President that this will be done the following day. Further, the fact that the Office of the President and Cabinet had come in with some protocol formalities, including handover of the condolence money, my position was that there was engagement between the President and the late Vice President. And as was the practice, which I was privileged to and privy to being in that office, such moments, the VP would not leave without taking leave of the President. So I was working in that context that tomorrow we'll do the formalization. Institutional arrangements preceding the journey to attend the funeral of late Kasambara. I believe these are normal institutional arrangements that relate to the processes and logistics of the travel arrangements. If this is the case, those in the Directorate of Administration organize the convoy and due requirements, including fuels and travel arrangements on 10th June 2024. But these had already started on the 8th, since as I learned later, that information was already passed to the Deputy Director. They had communicated to the Department of Public Events on the Vice President's attending the funeral ceremony for them to do the needful. The security team made appropriate formation and informed all concerned in the security system, as they do, which is outside my responsibility, about the travel of the Vice President, both to Kamuzu International Airport, Mzuzu Airport, and to Nkatabe. The Minister of Foreign Affairs planned for protocol services at Kamuzu International Airport, Mzuzu Airport, and Nkatabe. The role that I played and that of the office concerning the planning and the details thereof. The role I played. The planning of the President's program is guided by the Vice President and other factors that may arise in course of the program. The role of the Secretary to the Vice President, in this case myself, was to liaise with and through other officers in the office of the Vice President, officers in other government departments and agencies, depending on the nature of the program and associated mode of transport. The primary government departments and agencies outside the Office of the Vice President are the Protocol Directorate in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Department of Public Events, and the Office of the President and Cabinet when need arises. And in this case, I heard also that the Vice President was going to use the aircraft. I had communicated to the Army Commander, and the office did the same. So, the planning of the Vice President's on 10th was influenced and affected by the President Chakwera's travel to the Bahamas through Kamuzu International Airport in the afternoon of 10th June 2024, and the burial ceremony of late Rafael Kasambara, which was going to take place on the same day, 10th June 2024 in Katabe. In view of the above, the late Vice President informed me that he was going to attend the funeral. I think the details I've already reported in terms of the planning, the involvement of various officers in section 2.0 above. Equally, travel arrangements have been outlined, Honorable Chairperson, in section 2 as I was outlining the events preceding his travel to Nkatabe. And to confirm that my role was to inform the Principal Secretary and the Deputy Director, Administration, to commence the due arrangements and inform those that are concerned. Because beyond those, there is direct connect. The PSA and the Deputy Director, Administration, are the ones who go into the operatives after key issues have been decided on. In connection to others, I duly gave information to the relevant officers, and I also responded to questions from the Secretary to the President Cabinet on the travel arrangements. Coordination on a delegation of the Vice President is first between the Vice President and the Secretary of the Vice President, which I've already explained, and the guidance that I got on such a day, so on such an event. The Secretary of the Vice President, when informed of the trip, obviously, and as I did, I sought confirmation. But apart from those people, I also checked with the Guard Commander, the ADC, the Chief of Protocol, and the medical team that are always part of the present the Vice President's delegation, local or international. Communications with just to summarize, with other government institutions. Yes, I made direct communication with the Malawi Defense Force. I communicated with the Secretary of the President and Cabinet, Ms. Colleen Zamba. I responded to calls from the to the Cabinet. I also called the Special Advisor as well as the Deputy Chief of Protocol. Let me deal with the events immediately preceding the departure of the plane, the Vice President from Kamuzu International Airport. I have, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members of the committee, you forgive me for a repeat because I had structured the response as summoned. I arrived at Kamuzu International Airport close to the arrival of the late Vice President, and therefore I only witnessed the arrival of the late Vice President, whom I welcomed at the foot of the plane, handed over the envelope containing condolence money and the envelope containing the speech to the ADC, who boarded the plane before the late Vice President and the guard commander. The late Vice President was the last to board the plane before I bid him farewell, while informing him that the backed office memos to the state president would be ready for him to sign. At the close of the plane's door, I stepped back to the grass perimeter until the plane was airborne. I communicated with the late Vice President while airborne on a message, an urgent message that I had just received, on the cancellation of the visit to Malawi by the Right Honorable Andrew Mitchell, a minister in the conservative government of the United Kingdom, and that was around 09:30 hours. The late Vice President responded to my message around 09, that was on 09:57 hours. Having been informed of the same, he further asked whether Right Honorable Mitchell had cancelled the meeting because he was going to meet him instead of the president. Then later, having been informed that, and that was between 10:35 and 10:40, that the plane had not yet landed by the security officer responsible for operations, who was on the ground, Mr. Limbani Banda, who was at Kamuzu International Airport, I wrote a message to the late Vice President. And the message was, "Sir, I understand you are not able to land due to bad weather. I just advise that you return to Lilongwe." That was 11:10 hours. A message I never got a response from. Honorable Chairperson and honorable members of the committee, allow me, as I go down to conclude my submission, that I also share that immediate communications post failure of the plane to land, as I was informed by Mr. Limbani Banda. 10:41 hours, I received a call from the Secretary of the President Cabinet, but it was interrupted. 10:42, I got a WhatsApp message from the Secretary of the President Cabinet apologizing for the interrupted call. 10:43 hours, message to the Secretary to the President Cabinet, which read, "I guessed so," responding to what she had sent to me. 10:03, I made a voice call to the Secretary of the President Cabinet. There was no answer. 12:07 hours, a message from the Secretary of the President Cabinet said, "Heard that the plane failed to land. Weather." Verbatim. 12:08 hours, message to the Secretary to the President Cabinet. "Indeed, it failed, and I had called to inform you about it." Because in between, after that failure, I wanted to inform her of the same. 12:08 hours, Secretary to the President Cabinet sends me a WhatsApp message. "I was with HE. I noticed I missed your call, hence my message. Ish, Bebani." 12:10, message to the Secretary to the President and Cabinet. "We are waiting for the final position." The Secretary of the President Cabinet made further calls and sent WhatsApp messages, and I made replies, including one at 14:22. I was asking for the passenger manifest, phone numbers of those who were on board to help in picking location. She also asked where Madam Chilima was, and I duly told her that she was in Lilongwe at the residence. Chairperson, I'm supposed to present as well on the roles of the Office of the Vice President. I think regarding planning of the Red Vice President's program, these things have been covered in 2.0. And I think the role was to make inquiries on the availability of the MDF aircraft, the security and convoy formation, engaging with the Department of Events, arranging a hotel room at Mzuzu Hotel for the Red Vice President or his spouse to use for refreshing, or for overnight use on 10th June if the spies had gone to Katabe instead of him. So the Office of the VP was responsible for ensuring that all required aspects of the travel of the Red Vice President were in place based on the standard requirements when such local out of Lilongwe travel is undertaken. Passenger coordination, the administration and security engaged with the Malawi Defense Force, the Directorate of Protocol, or the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And in that case, given the nature of the trip, the office communicated with the Malawi Defense Force and those that I've already mentioned. I also would report in writing, as I've done, that the office engaged with the VVIP protocol services on the time and passenger details as a procedure. In conclusion, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable members of the committee, I humbly submit the above in line with and in response to the summons issued to me under Section 60, Subsection 3 of the Constitution and Section 9 of the National Assembly Powers and Privileges Act. Thank you for your kind attention, Honorable Chairperson. And
thank you very much, Dr. Chakwera. I open the floor to members to seek further clarification. Dedza Mayani, Mwanza Central, and Planta Malawi.
Thank you very much, Chair. Dr. Chakwera, first, we are very sorry as a nation, and for the loss that somebody was very close to you in your duties could just go in that manner. I just wanted to learn from you that the issue of a memo to the office of the president regarding the use of the military plane, and I want to extend also in regarding the travel to attend the funeral. I want you to confirm to this committee if indeed that memo was not formally written on the material day, meaning by the 9th of June. So, Chair, I want him first to just respond to that, and I wanted to ask a follow-up question, if that's possible with you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead. You can proceed to answer, and then there will be a follow-up question.
Honorable Chairperson and honorable members of the committee, that memo was not written on that material day.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Chakwera, would you please confirm to this committee that you used an assumption in completing the travel arrangements regarding that you thought that there might be other communication between the president and his vice? It was an assumption. I wanted you, if you can be able to confirm that. Thank you, Chair, and I'll have a follow-up question if he responds to that.
Honorable Chair and honorable members of the committee, it was not an assumption, because practice in between, there are no standard set procedures, because in the year preceding that event, we were writing straight to the military to check the availability, and they'll send the quotation, and on that basis, would proceed to procure and pay for it.
Chair, my last submission is if you can highlight, possibly, one or two events where you procured the military aircraft without necessarily involving the office of the president. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Chair and honorable members of the committee, I will not be very specific on the date, but there is record in the office for the Vice President on the numbers or the trips that the VP, that we wrote straight to the MDF, which I believe the office of the Vice President should be in a position to submit.
You had your hand up?
You had already recognized
Okay,
Mwanza
Central.
Central. Thank you very much, Chair. I have a couple of questions to Dr. Skwese. Dr. Skwese, you have submitted a WhatsApp message trail and an outline also on the conversation you had with the Secretary to the President. I'm just interested in the message that the outline on page 10 of your submission, that at 10:41, you received a call from the Secretary to the President, 10:41, but it was interrupted. At 10:42, WhatsApp message from the Secretary to the President apologizing for the interruption. 10:43, you sent a message to the Secretary to the President. I guessed so. 11:03, you made a voice call to the Secretary to the President, and she didn't answer. At 12:07, you received a message from the Secretary to the President and Cabinet. Heard that the plane failed to land. That's 12:07. Then 12:08, you sent a message to the Secretary to the President and Cabinet. Indeed, it failed, and I had called to inform you about it. 12:08, Secretary to the President and Cabinet, I was with HE. I noticed I missed your call, hence my message. Ish Pepan. 12:10, message to the Secretary to the President. We are waiting for the final position. This conversation has no message. It's not indicating any message that the Secretary to the President was calling for at 10:41, because you received a call. But in the conversation, you have not submitted any content, why she called you at 10:41, So I want to just find out from you if probably you missed it, or the call at 10:41 had I think maybe the information that she wanted to provide to you was not important anymore, because I thought maybe there could be somewhere where the reason for calling could appear. That's the question number one. Then the program that the Vice President would attend the burial ceremony was concluded on 9th of June. according to your submission. I'm sure you always have a protocol whenever the vice president or the president is attending an event. Did you get in touch, or anybody in your office gotten in touch with the people on the ground, people in Katape, to see if the arrival of the vice president would accommodate their program? And if at all you did, was a program drafted by your office or the family that was shared with you, the program that accommodated the vice president? My third question is, what was the expected time of arrival for the vice president at the Kavuzi village in Nkatape? What was the expected time of arrival? I want to marry the expected time of arrival and the program that was developed. I hear yesterday we had a family member, and we also had the council Wapona Kita, who indicated to us that the vice president was on the program. The vice president was speaking. So I wanted to get that from you. My last question, you had a conversation with the late vice president up to somewhere around a minute to 10. And he was able to text you. I hope it is nothing to do with me. That is at a minute to 10. I believe he was airborne. Did he probably tell you any unusual movement of the plane? Because the conversation went on to 10:01. He responded at 10:01. Did he report to you, or did he confine to you that there were some unusual movement of the plane? And at 10:07, you sent a message. Did that message go through? Did it tick? Because I know probably you could not get a blue tick, but at least you could get double ticks, meaning that the message went through. For now, Chair, let me wait for the responses before I can ask the other questions. Thank you.
Dr. Chakwera, can you
Thank
respond?
you. Yeah, thank you, Honorable Chair, and honorable members of the committee. Beyond engaging the deputy director and the operatives, I wasn't privy to the program on the ground. I didn't have any program regarding the funeral. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. The honorable member for Mwanza Central inquired issues around the program, and I was saying, beyond my communication in the evening to the people responsible with the logistics, in this case, the director of the deputy director administration, and those on the manifest, I didn't have anything to do with the rest of the program. And the only thing that I was interested in was after the BP was airborne to check on the landing. So, honorable members, honorable chairperson, honorable members, I'd never had any program, so I wouldn't know whether the VP was, or whether how the program accommodated him or not. And in that regard, I also wouldn't know the expected time of arrival at Kavuzi. However, I would want to indicate that in the itemized time by time submission that I've made, hopefully it has been distributed electronically, is that before that day, in the evening of the 9th, the Vice President had asked me to first to check the village, the name of the village for Red Kasambara, and then how long that village was from Zuzu. information which I communicated to him, that Kavuzu was about 21 kilometers away from Zuzu. So that detail is also provided. So beyond that, then I didn't know. I didn't know the expected arrival time after his arrival. On the conversation, 10:01. Yes, the last that I sent him on Major, he had responded by saying, after I told him that Timva, he responded that, I hope it's not about me. Then I said, Timva. And he wrote Timvadi. So those messages, that was the last responded to message from the Red Vice President. Thank you, Chairperson. I hope I've covered the questions.
Mulanje North?
Honorable Chair, you had recognized.
Recognize Lilongwe Mude, and then we Malabada.
But Chair, point of order. One question has not been answered.
Okay, after that question has been answered, and then we go to Mulanje North.
Doctor, I asked you about the conversation you had with the Secretary to the President. You have given us an outline. At 10:41, you received a call from the Secretary to the President, and at 10:42, you sent a message. I mean, you received another message apologizing for the interruption. But from there, I've not seen anything, detailing the reason for the call at 10:41. So I was saying, did you miss it, or maybe she had no other reason to tell you why she called you at 10:41?
Honorable Chairperson and honorable members of the committee, it's not truncated. It's reported as it is. So there was no message that was indicated as why I'd called at 10. But as you take the trail, possibly he wanted to speak to the issue of the plane. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Planter Malabada.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I would like to establish the kind of relationship Dr. Chakwera and the late Vice President had. How long had you known the late Vice President for? And how long had you worked for him in the office professionally? My second question is on the advanced team. The advanced team contains security officers. What is the role and scope of this advanced team, especially security officers? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chair. And thank you so much, Dr. Chakwera, because of a very clear presentation, and there is a submission. So most of the questions that I had about the manifest and everything else, you have covered them, and we have it on file. But I want to ask you about two questions. The first one, in the submission of Mr. Yesaya in the morning, there was an issue about condolence money. And I'm glad that you have explained where the money came from government, and it was meant for condolence, and you handled the money. So my question is, we know when we have money in the envelope, we know it's money. The envelope you had, was it in any way suspicious that you would suspect that it's not money in it? That's my first question. And my second question is the submission of Mr. Yesaya, which you have actually confirmed, indicate that the late Vice President did not intend to go. It was a last-minute decision that was made for him to go and attend the funeral. In any way, in your conversation, do you know why there was that sudden change of plan for him to travel? Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Can you respond to those two questions?
Yes. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable members of the committee. I always struggle when people ask the question of the relationship. I knew Saulos in college as my junior. I knew Saulos as a friend to many of the friends. And I knew Saulos when he was times I have weekends around at my brother's house in Blantyre, Nyambadwe. The knowing that they are friends. Professionally, I knew Saulos when I was Secretary for Information Communication. Then he was the CEO of Airtel, or Zen. And with that professional interaction, some minds do meet on certain elements and build from that bondage. That's how I knew him first. Second, I knew SKC when the DPP government, or DPP won in 2014. As Secretary for Information, I was tasked with quite a number of assignments. One, I hope, without permission from those that are out there, when I was tasked with the first to come up with a portrait, official portrait for President Peter Mutharika. So I led that process and the finalization of the official portrait. The person who was tasked with that responsibility to have the final say was late Vice President. So the bonding begins to grow in that. I was also privy as Secretary for Information then to work on the official statement that President Peter would be using at Kamuzu Stadium. So that also gave me a closer interaction with him professionally. After change of government, as NAPS would know, you are not so sure where you're going to be in terms of the posting. Saulos had in his wisdom, I should believe, and maybe advised that I should become his principal secretary. Of course, there was a colleague there. I'll say this, which I normally don't want to say. It was a long struggle. I didn't want to, because of the background relationship that we had, to maintain some professionalism. But with the last word, after 35 minutes of engaging on a phone call, he told me, I am the Vice President. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, you'll be receiving the letter. At that time, they were forming so that's how it happened. The airport is beyond our office, so we don't do. What we do is to ask, be given what is available, and then transactions. As I said, communications are made. It is the responsibility of those in charge of the various elements in the process of ensuring that the security or the safety of the VVIPs is done, to either tell us or say it's not going to be possible to do one or two things in this case. I submit.
We had Mulanje North.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just one single question. In the messages on 10th June, around a minute after 11, you had sent a message to the late VP's phone that says, express that you're worried. Sir, I understand that you are unable to land due to bad weather. I just advise that you return to Lilongwe. And there was no reply. But we've put a commentary to say, I sent this message after receiving communication from Mr. Limban Banda, security officer, operations, who was at Mzozo Airport. So I just wanted to find out from you what was the nature of discussion or the information that had been given to you by Mr. Limban Banda regarding the failure of the plane to land. Thank you.
You may respond.
Yeah, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members of the committee, when the vice president leaves from the airport, there was a tradition, I don't know what's happening, we circulate on the group that airborne, meaning, or departed, so that they expect they can be calculating their time. So by the discussion that I had with Mr. Banda was first I think I'd called to check to say the vice president has not landed. And I think he spoke about issues of, I think in a brief talk about the weather. Then I said, okay, fine, you let me know as soon as he lands. So that's triggered the rest of the other engagements. Thank you.
Kalebe North, I'll come there. Kalebe North.
Thank you, Chair. My question is coming from the page 19 on the Commission of Inquiry, previous Commission of Inquiry, on procurement of the MDF MAF T03. Dr. Squese, you explained here that the Commission received evidence from Dr. Squese that procurement of an aircraft for use by the Vice President previously commenced with a memorandum. And I wonder, you told this committee that you don't have any memorandum. So I wonder, this communication was done by verbal at the high office like that? You can confirm that?
Honorable Chairperson and honorable members of the committee, yes, this one went down without the memo. As I said, it used to be. Later in the years, it was when we have agreed with the Vice President on the mod, writing a letter, or colleagues calling the MDF, and thereafter the process began to happen. So in this case, yes, it happened. That's why there were calls after I engaged the Deputy Director of Administration, who made inquiry and later on reported to me on the Nane Avela Dirite. So I would explain it in that way.
Chair Unzonzavai.
Thank you so much, Chair. Mine is just one question. During confirmation of the aircraft, I would like to know from you, Dr. Sikwense, if the Army Commander told you any technical issues, unusual occurrences, or operation concerns observed before or during the flight. Thank you.
Can you take that so we move on?
Honorable Chairperson and members of the committee, nothing of that sort was ever discussed, or he never communicated anything in that regard.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good afternoon, Doc. I'll first start with your verbatism when you are responding to a question from Zomba Tonwe, where he was talking about the normal procedure on the hiring of the Malawi Defense Force plane.
When they arrived in Mzuzu, did they give you a situational report or a risk assessment report? Did they report it, or you said there's a WhatsApp group and they were communicating on WhatsApp group? What time did they arrive? Did they give you a report? Was there a report?
Honorable Chairperson, there was no report submitted on the situation on the ground, except on later on 10 o'clock when I was checking on the checking on whether the plane had arrived.
Which is rather odd, because it is reported in all reports that the weather was very bad. A night before, even on the day, and the visibility was very low. So if you had a competent team that had gone on site and arrived there early in the morning, they should have flagged the weather to you. Because you're saying you knew nothing about the weather from the army commander a day before. Even on the day, there was no report about the weather report from your team. So I find it very odd. Would I be correct to say that?
Chairperson, honorable members, honorable Chairperson, you would naturally say where they, but you also read the report that area on the weather in Mzuzu was, I think when the plane was leaving or whatever, I think the visibility was quite permissive when you read the other report and others. So, but you could have good room to suspect of incompetence.
Dr. Sikwesi, you've did a very good job for a very long time managing the affairs and the office of the Vice President, and that's why he kept you for a long time. But something went wrong. In retrospect, is there anything you could have done better to save the situation or manage the situation better? Do you have any regrets when you look back?
I wish I could dream and tell him that, sir, you are tired, don't. He was tired, and he mentioned it. Don't travel. But because behind the scenes, other people, I don't know up to now what made him to make that decision. Secondly, in terms of the process, it's what beats me very much. I've been on the plane with him, some trips, not that plane, but the other one. Yeah, I think both. What beats me is that where was this decisiveness of SKC? Because it was somebody who were in his senses, and the moments that we threw at times joking, they would sell. If inerundi mauza kuti tizienda kunyanja huku. No, samaende kunyanja kulibwinotigwe by that. Ngadi kugwa mu at one point when we were flying that in the normal jokes that we used to have. So what beats me is from the time he said I'm going, I'm not going, what was it that was in his mind that should I have done something different? Yeah, maybe I would have lied to him. I would have lied to him, created a story that would bring him back. It is the reason I wrote, if the weather is bad, please come back.
Thank you very much for your candid response. I think we've had a robust engagement with you. I appreciate your sincerity. We've had you over for 1.5 hours. This was the only moment that the committee could have a conversation with somebody who was close to the former vice president. In this session, maybe apart from Madam Mary Chilima, you're next. So the members needed to feel the sense, the emotions, what was going on, and the interactions with the former vice president. Maybe that's why the interrogation has been very extensive. But we appreciate your time to respond and divulge more information. Okay. You may have maybe a few comments to make before you take leave. We will allow you to say your last words.
Honorable Chairperson and honorable members of the committee. First of all, thank you for inviting me to share my positions, and I hope they also bring a different dimension to the stories that we are running around. One thing that if this committee may wish, or the other committee, or the government of Malawi may wish to do moving forward, recognizing the efforts, particularly in the MDF, that SKC would have loved to do, as many may recall, during the first phase, that we start work on maintaining the MDF helicopters, so that this country may have very reliable equipment, is to find space in this country to ensure that the Malawi Defense Force, not only the presidency, has an aircraft that should be conveniently used. It's laughable. I'm saying this because with engagement with other countries, having been Secretary for Foreign Affairs, where you have a Prime Minister or a Vice President on delegation uses the presidential jet, not the President. It would be very nice one day, before some of us cross our breath is out of us, that we see a Malawi with a presidential jet. It would be an honor for the efforts that SKC made. It should also be a reminder to the many of us and the country as a whole that there be some robust reforms on the functionality of the office of the President and the Vice President. This country is inherently flawed, I'm sorry to say this, in as far as politics, development, interactions is concerned. I know I rarely do this, I rarely say these things, but I'm saying this for the first time in public, but that's my wish, that we need to resolve our minds. Mindset change should be the mantra, and then in this way, the soul of SKC and those who departed with him may find more comfortable, and we can say, yes, he did it. Thank you very much.